right, so let's get started here. Today is April the 11th, and the recording I'm going to make today is talking about how I became an engineer. And in one of my other videos, I talked about how I started working as an engineer in coal-fired power plants, and then I transitioned over to the railway industry. Today I want to talk about how I became an engineer. It was never planned, but I had some great guidance that came from unexpected places, or really people. All through junior high and high school, I had no idea what I wanted to do in terms of a career. My folks really never discussed career options with me. Nobody ever really talked to me about what kind of jobs were available out there in the world after high school or after going to college, if I was going to go to college. In high school, I was a okay student, but I wasn't the kind of student that the administration really took a shine for and provided any kind of really good guidance to me. That seemed to go to the top students. Not sure why. I guess if I had asked for it, I would have gotten help. But I didn't. And I graduated from high school, and I decided I didn't want to go to college. I wanted to just work for a while. And at the time, I was working for Furr's grocery store in Lubbock, Texas. Furr's was this pretty big business. It was a family-owned business of grocery stores and cafeterias. Corky Furr was the son of Roy Furr, the patriarch of the family. Corky ran the grocery stores, and his son, Danny, kind of was his right-hand man. Corky also had two sons, one really no-account guy named Eddie. He died young. I'm not sure how he died young, but I met Eddie and Mike. Mike was his other son. They just both lived off the largesse of their father. Don Furr, now Danny worked. Danny was a hard worker. Don Furr ran the cafeterias. If you're old enough, you would have remembered Furr's cafeterias. Kind of like Luby's, if you've ever been to a Luby's. They owned their own private jets. Now, Roy Furr would have never had a jet, but he died, and then Corky and Don, they had to have their own private jets to go cruise around and visit all their stores and everything. And as part of that, they decided to start a business called Avtech Aviation. I'm talking about this because I eventually went over and worked for Avtech. But at the time I got out of high school, I was working at Furr's grocery store as a stocker and a checker. Want to make a mention about Roy Furr, the patriarch of the family. He built that family fortune. He started working at his father's and uncle's little general store in Childress, Texas. Childress is a little town up in West Texas, just south of the Panhandle. He built that business. Roy Furr, the patriarch, he built that business into a big chain of grocery stores and cafeterias, and he had oil and some other businesses, and he died in 1975. And at that point, everything started going downhill, and eventually the family business went bankrupt. I talk about this because it's a good example about how a family's wealth can be built by a patriarch and then just evaporate by the third or fourth generation. And that's pretty much what happened with the Furr's dynasty. I didn't want to stay working as a stocker and a checker at the grocery stores. So I asked if I could go over work at their new business, Avtech Aviation, and learn how to work on airplanes. And they were looking for people. They liked me, and they were looking for people, and decided to take advantage of some of the people that they had working at the grocery stores. And So they hired me over at Avtech. At Avtech, I started as a line boy, and that was somebody that cleaned up airplanes. We washed and waxed airplanes. We filled them up with gas, checked the oil, clean out the jets and clean out the private airplanes. And it was fun. It was a lot of fun. And occasionally you got to go for an airplane ride, particularly if some of the instructors were trying to get some hours in and they needed to go fly, and they'd ask if you wanted to go along with them and just fly around. After a while, I asked if I could move over into maintenance, and I went to work in the propeller shop. And that was interesting, working on propellers. I had no idea there was so much involved in working on propellers. And eventually I went to work over at their crop duster maintenance facility, and that was interesting as well. Crop dusters, oh my goodness, they're a whole breed of people that they're crazy. People that do crop dusting, those pilots, they live and die by the seat of their pants. I had this cat. One thing I noticed one day, my cat was getting sick, and I wasn't sure what was going on, but I did notice one morning that my cat was sleeping in my clothes basket where I threw all my clothes after I came home from working on crop dusters. Well, crop dusters, by their very nature, work with chemicals. And I thought, what's going on here? So I quit putting, back then, unless you had an animal that was just dying, you didn't go to the vet. But I took the clothes out of, I quit putting my crop duster maintenance clothes, my airplane maintenance clothes. I quit putting those in the clothes basket, and the cat still slept in the clothes basket, but not on my crop duster clothes. And it got well. And I got to thinking, my goodness, if those chemicals are doing that to my cat, what are they doing to me? The other thing I learned about working on airplanes is it's long hours, low pay, hot in the summer, and cold in the winter. And I decided that just wasn't for me. When I had gotten out of high school, my parents had decided to move to Albuquerque, New Mexico. My dad took a new job over there at the cathedral there in Albuquerque, and it was a big deal for him. And he moved over there with my sister, and then before long, my brother moved over there. He was wanting to do something different, so he moved over there. And my dad and brother started a firewood business. So for about 6 months, I worked 2 jobs to earn some money, get my truck paid off, and I did that. I worked hard. I had 2 jobs, and I saved up. Get this, I saved up. Not only did I pay off my truck, but I saved up $750. That was a lot of money for a 19-year-old in 1977. I mean, I was only paying $50 a month for my apartment, and gas was only about 30 cents a gallon. So, that $750 went a long way for a 19-year-old kid in 1977. So I packed up everything I had and got in my truck, and I moved to Albuquerque and started working for my brother and my dad in the firewood business. Well, I soon discovered that working in a firewood business is hard work, low pay, hot in the summer, cold in the winter. It's a tough business too. I mean, not only is the firewood, it's just hard work, but it's hard to satisfy customers. You never deliver enough wood. They always thought that they were getting shorted. The logs weren't split good enough. They were too big or too small. The wood wasn't seasoned enough. You didn't stack it well enough. The wood might have bugs in it. I mean, it was just everything wrong about that. And I didn't like it one bit, but I was doing it. It was helping out my brother and my dad. But my dad, he wasn't the greatest businessman in the world. He was a great priest and a wonderful, wonderful preacher and a great priest, and really cared a lot about his congregations. But as far as a businessman, he just, that wasn't his forte. One day he bought 3 cords of wood, sight unseen, located up in Taos, New Mexico, and sent me up there to pick it up with the pickup truck and the trailer that we had. And that was 3 hours driving each way. Plus I had to load those 3 cords of wood onto the trailer. And then when I got back to Albuquerque, both my brother and dad were mad at me because the wood wasn't really very good. It wasn't very good wood, but heck, he paid for it. What was I supposed to do? Anyway, they were mad at me and I had had enough, so I quit. They said, "No, you can't quit. This is a family business." And I said, "You just watch me." I quit. And then I enrolled at the Albuquerque Technical Vocational Institute, TVI. It's now called Central. I think it's called Central New Mexico Community College, but Albuquerque was great. I went into the bookkeeping course and it was a lot of fun. I was 19 years old. There was a lot of young women in there, people my age, and it was a lot of fun. I learned bookkeeping and typing. Yeah, I took a typing class. I learned how to use a 10-key adding machine without looking at it. Typing you learn to do without looking at it. And I had a lot of fun. It was self-paced, and I finished way ahead of schedule. One of the teachers, and I'll never forget him, Dennis Royer was his name. One day he came and got me and another guy named Tom. And he says, "Come on, let's go get a cup of coffee. We need to talk." So we went down to the little cafeteria area that was there at TVI. He bought us coffee. And he said, "You guys don't belong here. You two need to go to the university." And he explained where to go at the university. And so next day I went over to UNM to the admissions department and talked to them and told them what was going on. And they said, "Sure. Have you got your SAT scores?" I'm like, "Well, what's that?" They said, "Well, it's a test you got to take to get into college." And I said, "Well, how do I do that?" They said, "Well, it costs $20, and there's going to be a test session next week that you can attend. And you just pay your $20 and come over and take the test, and then we'll see how your test scores are." And so I did that. I took the test, and a few weeks later, I get a letter in the mail that had my test scores in it. It was real easy. The test wasn't easy. It was pretty hard, but doing this whole process was pretty easy. And so I got my scores, and I went back to the admissions department. And the gal that was there, she said, "Well, wait here. I want to go get somebody." And I was like, I wonder what's going on. Well, this lady came out, this older lady came out, and she said, "Are you Stephen?" And I said, "Yes, ma'am, I am." And she said, "Well, you've got really good SAT scores." I said, "I do." And she goes, "Yeah, they're really good. We're going to give you a scholarship to the university." And so they gave me a scholarship that covered my tuition. Well, it wasn't that much. Tuition then was like $224 for a semester. And she said, "But we're going to pay for that, and you got to buy your books." And so my mom and dad helped me with the books. It was about $100. And so I enrolled in the business administration, School of Business Administration. And I tell you, the first semester I got straight A's, and I did not have to work that hard. I also, because I was, I didn't have much money, and I really wasn't a dependent of my parents anymore. I got a part-time job. I was able to get a job through a government program for kids that needed financial help. I was able to get a part-time job working as a clerk at the Kirtland Air Force Base accounting department. And that was a real eye-opener. I went over there and I got the job, and And I was a clerk, and so I did typing. I ran errands for the staff there. I put things in file cabinets, or I cleaned up file cabinets and did that. But I got to tell you, that accounting department was almost 100% women. And so I was this young guy working in this accounting department full of women. And I had no idea what it was like to work in a group of women. I'd worked with guys. I'd worked on construction sites, and I'd worked at the Avtech Aviation, where it was almost all guys. And of course, at the grocery stores, all the stockers were all guys. There were woman checkers and stuff, but I mean, guys. Look, guys, when they work together, they might get mad at each other and argue and do stuff, but eventually they just get over it and go drink beer and they're fine. But not women. Mm-mm, mm-mm. No, when those women got mad at each other, it was for keeps, and they were mean to each other, and I had no idea that that's what it was like. But uh, I know that's probably not politically correct to talk about, but I don't care. I can't get fired now that I'm retired. And it was truly that way. They were mean to each other. I mean, if a woman got out of the good graces of the other ones, I mean, God bless her. She's going to have a tough time. Anyway, it was a real eye opener for me. Just learning. I was a young guy. I was just learning the ways of the world. Well, along came a RIF. That's a reduction in force. But fortunately, since I already had a job, I had first dibs on any of the other jobs that might be open for clerks and stuff that might be open over at the Air Force Base. And I got a transfer over to the Air Force Weapons Laboratory. And that was really interesting work. This was during the Carter administration. And at the time, the government was working on the MX missile system and an airborne laser. And I started working with engineers. I didn't know what engineers did, and I was a clerk, and I still did the same, running errands, and I cleaned up pickup trucks and took care of the filling up the trucks with gas and oil. There was a little fleet of vehicles, and it was fun work for me, and it provided an income while I was going to school. But after about 3 months there, this guy named Joe Ayala, he was an older engineer, Joe Ayala. He came in one day and he gave me a list of problems to solve. He says, "Here, I got these problems I need to get solved, and maybe you can work them out for me. This book might help." And he gave me a book of Rourke's formulas for stress and strain. And I had no idea, but Joe was just setting me up. And I did that. I went and solved all those problems, worked them out, found all the formulas I needed in the book, and did all that and took it back to Joe. And he said, "Well, you did pretty good at this, didn't you?" And I said, "Yeah, it was fun to do. I enjoyed it." He said, "Well, why don't you consider being an engineer?" And I said, "Well, what do engineers do?" He said, "Well, we do what you just did. We solve problems. You know, a lot of them are math problems or materials problems." And he said, "Look around at what everybody here is doing. We're all engineers, and this is what we do. We design things, we build things, we analyze data, we analyze results, and we make things work." He said, "Why don't you go over and talk to somebody I know, go over to the university and go talk to the engineering department." Well, it so happened that Bill Gafford was a friend of the family and a member of my dad's congregation, and he was in the civil engineering. He was a civil engineering professor at UNM, and I asked Bill if I could come talk to him. I didn't call him Bill; I called him Professor Gafford. But I went over and talked to Professor Gafford to see what he could tell me about getting into the engineering department. And of course, he was very happy to help me. and told me what I needed to do and helped me get transferred over to the engineering department. And so that's how I started I went into mechanical engineering. That was going to be my discipline. Well, that was another eye opener. I had no idea how hard studying for engineering was going to be. And I went from making straight A's to struggling to get C's. It was so hard. And I went from being able to breeze through my homework to having to really work hard. But I did it. I got in there. And around the second semester into my engineering degree, I got interested in structures and materials and transferred over to the civil engineering department. Oh my goodness, it was a crisis when I told my dad what I had done. And he was so mad and so disappointed. Really, I didn't realize it, but at the time, civil engineering was not considered to be as prestigious a degree as mechanical engineering or electrical engineering. I didn't know that. I was going to be an engineer, and I was like, well, Dad, why are you mad at me? I'm working on an engineering degree. No, it's not the same. You're getting a substandard engineering degree. Well, that's truly not the case. Civil engineering is just as hard as any of the other engineering degrees, and you make just as much money and all of that. And I have many, many dear friends that I respect greatly for their technical capabilities who are civil engineers. But anyway, I did that and was over in the civil engineering department. But one course that everybody had to take, there were these courses that everybody had to take. One of them was thermodynamics and then heat transfer. And I loved doing thermodynamics. Most people hated it. I won't use the term they call it, but most people hated thermo and they didn't like heat transfer. But I loved it. It was great. And that's what convinced me to go back to mechanical engineering. And I did. And I stayed there until I was graduated with my degree in mechanical engineering. During my studies, dynamics and kinematics were weed out courses for mechanical engineering. And they are tough. Let me tell you, they are nothing short of very difficult math classes in disguise as engineering classes. And they were hard. I struggled. And one day I got my test results and I went in to talk to Dr. Zhu. He was this short little Chinese guy. Smartest guy you ever knew. He taught dynamics and kinematics. He taught that course. He walked in there with a box of colored chalk, a piece of string, and a yardstick, and that was it. Everything came from his head. And as I took my class notes, they were like a textbook. And it was beautiful notes, and truly the class notes were the textbook, although we did have a textbook and we had to use it. But he taught that class out of his head, and my goodness, what we learned from him. Hard stuff, and it just came out of his head. But a very nice man, don't get me wrong. Unfortunately, those notes, my class notes from that class, were lost years later when the house we were living in, this is well after I'd graduated and was working and was in my career, we had a broken water pipe and it flooded our basement, and it destroyed a lot of my materials from my university studies. And unfortunately, those notes were part of what was destroyed. But anyway, that's neither here nor there. I went in to talk to Dr. Zhu about my test scores, and I'll never forget what he said, and these are almost his exact words. He said, "Steve, problem very simple. Either you not work hard enough to be engineer, or you not smart enough to be engineer." Right. Well, at the time, I was living in a house with two of my best friends who neither one of them were going to college. They weren't students, and it was party time central at this rental house. We always had company, there was always stuff going on, and it was impossible to study at home. And I chose to take the option of, rather than choose the option of not being smart enough to be an engineer, I thought maybe Dr. Jew is right and I'm not working hard enough. And so I started going to the UNM library every night of the week to do my homework. And shortly I moved out of the rental house and into my own apartment with no roommates. And I studied every single day of the week. I took days off, weekends, because I worked a lot. And I worked all the way through school. And, and lo and behold, it was amazing. My grades started to improve. Imagine that. I started working harder on my homework and my grades got better. And it was hard. It was hard. Engineering was not easy for me. It took me a little longer to graduate, too. It took me 5.5 years to get through. But I will say, I worked the entire time that I was in college. I worked to earn money to help pay for my expenses and my tuition. Oh, by the way, as soon as I got over to engineering school, I lost my scholarship because I couldn't keep up my grades. But what can I say? I also took a few extra liberal arts classes that my engineering advisors did not understand why I wanted to take. I took extra English classes. I took some extra philosophy classes. And I truly believe that those extra liberal arts classes, particularly the English classes, served me very well throughout my career because it taught me better critical thinking. And the English classes taught me how to write, to be a better writer. And so it was really worth the effort. Plus, I enjoyed going to college, and being there an extra year or so was not a problem for me. I was working and, it was great. And also moving between engineering disciplines, transferring over and then transferring back, that lost me a bit of time. But eventually I did graduate and got my degree in engineering. I did leave school with a little bit of student loan debt, like $12,000. But I paid that off as quickly as I could, and working along the way helped keep my student loan debts down. But it also limited the number of classes I could take each semester. But I did it. And finally, in May of 1983, I was graduated with my degree in mechanical engineering, which I'm very grateful for. It served me very well in my career. I want to talk about three people that I already mentioned who I'll never forget. The first was Dennis Royer. He was my teacher at Albuquerque TVI. He saw something different in me that other people had not. And he was the one that pushed me over and told me I belonged at the university and pushed me into doing something more than what I was doing. And the second was Joe Ayala, who cared enough to take me under his wing and nudge me over into an engineering curriculum. And throughout my time working at the Air Force Weapons Laboratory, he watched out for me and was a mentor. He was a wonderful mentor. That's the word to use, a mentor. And of course, the third was Bill Gafford, who guided me into the engineering program at the University of New Mexico and also kept tabs on me and made sure I was along the way. As a friend of the family, he made sure that I was paying attention to the things that I needed to pay attention to, and providing guidance to me. I say this now to maybe the older people, older being you're into your career and you're now helping to provide guidance to younger people. So never underestimate the importance of being a good mentor and providing guidance to a younger person. You will never know just how important it can be. Had I not had Dennis Royer, Joe Ayala, and Bill Gafford in my life, I seriously doubt that I would have ended up in the career path that I did, well, the educational path that I did in becoming a mechanical engineer, and then the wonderful career path that I had. You just never know. And I am so grateful to those kind gentlemen. Well, there you have it. That's how I became an engineer and had a wonderful career. So thank you for listening.